Page 215 of The Unfolding is the story of Riley Clemmons.
Putting identity and worth and things that are temporary and fickle will and did leave me so broken and so miserable and so exhausted. I was so tired trying to chase down worth.
God's story has been unfolding.
Since the beginning of time.
He invites you to be a part of it.
Wow. Another page in The Unfolding.
Hey, this is Meredith Foster. If you realized you were chasing success for all the wrong reasons, would you be willing to walk away from your career? It's a tough question. Now imagine what it would be like to wrestle with that when you're 21 years old. Riley Clemmons was discovered at a school performance when she was just 13. Within a couple of years, she signed a record deal, and then Riley spent the next 6 years doing all the things, writing and recording songs, doing concerts, touring. All the while, she was watching every song to see where it landed on the charts and wondering, was she talented enough? Was she successful enough? Was she enough? By the time she was 21, Riley was burned out and ready to walk away.
I am a native Tennessean. I was born in Nashville, and I'm still here to this day. So as a Tennessee kid, growing up in the South, big, really tight-knit family. But I grew up in the church and in faith. Since I can remember, people were talking about Jesus, and we were going to church, and the whole nine. So I grew up in a really... in a faith-centered home. I am the middle child, and I feel every single bit of that, Meredith. I feel it every single day of my life. I was always singing and dancing and making music and wanting to perform. That was me as a kid. I still carry a lot of those characteristics around with me, but that was what early life was like.
When you say you were a stereotypical middle child, what was that experience like for you?
I don't know if I ever struggled. And that's the thing, I look back and like, no, I had plenty of attention. I was just fine. I think that it was the whole struggle. How I've always voiced it is, well, my brother's the oldest, right? And he gets all of these privileges first, and he's the first one. So my parents weren't as, they were a little softer on him, right? And then the baby, my little sister, I'm like, they're so easy on her. She's the baby. That I'm in the middle. And it really became a personality trait of mine for a minute there. Less so now, but yeah, just your stereotypical. My siblings are both my brother's a software engineer, and my sister is an IT auditor in data analytics. So they're both very smart and brilliant, and yeah, typical like middle child who wants to be a poet and go write songs. And
were you thinking about that when you were little? Were you writing poetry when you were young? When did you write your first song?
I mean, there are videos of me singing songs that I would come up with when I was probably 4 or 5. I just loved it. It was as a kid, without really thinking of anything else, I always gravitated towards making music and singing and writing and performing. I've just always loved it. It was never, I don't remember ever deciding like, I want to do music. It was always like, of course I'm going to do music. What else am I going to do? Yeah.
Okay, so you started in the industry at a pretty young age. How did that happen? You were early teens?
Yeah, I was a baby. I look back now.
Yeah.
I mean, I at the time, I was 13 years old, writing songs in my bedroom, on the dance team, doing theater, performing anytime I could, singing all the time. That was my life. I met a manager when I was 13 at a school choir performance. And that kind of started my professional career, meeting management that early. Later, signed with management, and then ended up signing my first publishing deal when I was 15, ended up signing with a label shortly after that. It was a crazy time to go so quickly from just being a kid and writing songs to, hey, you're going to write around Nashville, and you're going to write with adults, and it's going to be very crazy. But yeah, it was wild. I look back now and I'm like, man, I really thought I had a lot figured out at 14. I guess most 14-year-olds do, but
probably do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was very, very early start.
So, as a a mom of, I have a 20, 18, and 16-year-old girls.
Whoa.
And I think about, those ages developmentally, to be thrust into the music industry at the same time that you're like maturing. Woo, I could see that could be fraught with, some things that might be really challenging. What was it like for you?
Man, I mean, I am so grateful. I look back on the time and it was amazing. I got to do so many cool things and all the good stuff, right? Of being signed at a label and all these things when you're a kid, genuinely a kid. There were also really hard moments because naturally I was growing up. I was figuring out who I am and what I believed in. What does my faith mean to me? It's separate from my parents' faith, and I'm gonna have to figure that out. And all of these things are developmentally happening in those pivotal years. And I was doing it in front of an audience and trying to figure out what kind of music I really wanted to make and what I really wanted to say and all of the things. And those were the challenging moments when you are confronted with these big questions and, you're trying to be an adult and you're trying to run a company, and it was time. It was a time. I'm grateful for great parents. I don't think I would have survived it without them.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I'll bet. When you were signed, was it Christian music?
Yeah. So when I was naturally writing songs, so much of what I was writing was through the lens of my faith. At 13, that was the life perspective I had even then. That was my whole world. That's how I was raised. Naturally, a lot of the songs that I were writing were Christian songs. I don't think I ever said, I'm gonna be XYZ type of artist. Yeah, I was so young. I wasn't really making those decisions. I just knew I loved to write songs about Jesus. I naturally fell into that. But again, you have those moments. I had those moments between ages 14 and 20. I'm like, no, what do I want to do? Is this what I want to write? Is this what I want to say? Do I want to be a Christian artist? And, I was asking those questions and signed, and it was so many thoughts hitting me all at once. It was a massively developmental time. And it's so funny. I tell people all the time, and I'm grateful for how it's gone. At 24 today, as a Christian artist, I love making Christian music. I love writing songs through the lens of my belief and through Jesus. I love that it brings people hope. And the Lord has been so faithful throughout all of it. I am more on fire for ministry than I've ever been in my life. Even after walking through the industry, which isn't always, it's business, right? When there's money, there's business. And that's the reality of it. So it's been a whole thing. But honestly, I love the ministry side of it more than I ever have.
I'm picturing you as a, 16 or 17-year-old on stage. For an adult who's decades into faith, it's hard to stand up and articulate things about faith. I'm just curious what that was like for you as a young teenager, especially in a time when you're still trying to figure out what you believe. Was that difficult to be on stage and you're sharing faith in Jesus?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yes and no. Sharing Jesus was never hard. That was always I felt the hope of Jesus in my spirit to the point where I just wanted people to feel that too. I really did. That was the goal. That was, the simple-mindedness of being 16. Not the simple-mindedness, just the purity of thought. That was what it was to me. The hardest part of it all, I think, was being a 16-year-old and feeling a lot of pressure, not necessarily from other people. It was more from myself to be perfect and to, quote any scripture that anybody calls out to you and go up there and speak with authority. And I don't know. I'm still figuring out. I'm still talking to Jesus every day. I have some big questions and I'm still working through a lot of this stuff. And I think that was the hard part, was this need to present this very put together, perfect young Christian woman image when so many days I just didn't feel like her. There's so many days I was like, who am I to do this? It was so much imposter syndrome. So much.
What did that do in terms of like your mental health as you're dealing with that? I think about how that might have been 15 or 20 years ago, but now you add the layer of, it's not just your time on stage, it's not just the music you put out, but there's this whole thing of social media that's going too. And so that just seems like it multiplies the impact of that.
Yeah, my mental health, I've always been very passionate about mental health and tuned into my brain and where it's at and how I'm feeling. And it's been a struggle. I mean, I'm pretty open about it now. I wasn't at the time, but I've been diagnosed with OCD for almost a decade now, which is crazy to think about. And that's tough. Again, it comes back to this idea of perfectionism and control, that I saw reflected in multiple areas of my life. As I continued getting older, there are a couple moments where there were low mental health moments for sure, but the biggest one I can think about, it was 2021, and I'd been releasing music for a few years at that point, had some success, had some songs do really well, which was such a blessing, massive blessing. But I had this come to Jesus moment, honestly, where I was like, whoa, I feel like I've been this projected image version of myself for so long that I'm not sure I know who I am and what I want to say. I'd lost a bit of the ability to be genuine and authentic. And I had grown up making music. I'd grown up in front of a lot of different eyeballs, and so much of what I was doing was just trying to please people and make people happy. So the intentions were just, it was skewed, and I felt it. I felt this deep sense of my purpose and worth comes from where my single is charting this week. My sense of worth comes from how great people think I am or how talented they think I am. And at 21, it hit me. I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's too much to live my life believing that my purpose and worth is found in that. And so it was a little bit of a meltdown. It was a little bit of like, oh my gosh, my world's crashing down kind of moment. I just remember having this deep set feeling of you have to take a break. You have to stop.
At 21, Riley had already been pursuing a career in music for 6 years. The pressure had built and finally couldn't be ignored. What would happen if she stepped away? What would she find out if she stopped long enough to hear what God wanted to say?
I just remember having this deep set feeling of you have to take a break. You have to stop. It was tough because there was momentum built and we were, I had a career. I remember feeling a strong nudge from what I believe is the Lord of, hey, Riley, you gotta slow down, pause long enough to connect with me, not because you need to connect with me for your career, but because you need to connect with me as a person. And so I took the greater part of a year off to do that.
I assume you had to say to people who probably would have preferred that you keep going.
Yeah.
What was it like to say, I'm going to take some time off?
Most of my team responded really well, which I'm really grateful for. My family was super supportive, which helped. And then again, majority of my team could not have been more amazing. They were so for me, having a reset. I'd been running as fast as I could since I was 15. So everybody was really for it. And I believed that I would be able to write and create from a much healthier place and a much more authentic place if I did that. I also had the thought of maybe I'll take this time off and decide that I don't want to do this anymore. It was up in the air. It took a lot of bravery looking back from all of us, for the whole team to trust the process, and it ended up being one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life, though.
I would love to dig into that just a little bit, because I think that's the point where many of us, we're too afraid to surrender something to God, even when we can tell in our spirit that we're wilting. When you look back on that time before you made the decision, can you point to anything that you think was like helped you to come to the place where you're like, yeah, I've got to do this and I'm willing to do this?
Yeah. And I think I got to the point. I remember there was a pivotal moment. I was sitting on the couch with my mom, just crying. I had struggled so much with comparison and just this feeling of like, everybody's outrunning me. I don't know what to do. I'm exhausted. I just feel like I just keep going into the studio, trying to make something that will be successful to the point where I'm not even enjoying making music anymore. And I love music more than anything. So that was a weird feeling. It was all of that. And honestly, I think it was very deeply instinctual. And I had a lot of peace in trusting my gut on that. And I had the ability to lean into family and friends who helped me through it. But I think what you said is so good. It comes back to surrender. And I'll be really candid with you. This past month has been maybe one of the hardest in my life. There's been a lot going on just personally that's been really heavy. And it's just this reminder to me. I look back on tough seasons and tough months or tough years, and surrendering is so hard. It's something as a recovering people pleaser and control freak, I really struggle with trusting that God really is going to prosper whatever it is if I surrender it. It is so hard to lay it at the feet of Jesus when your human nature goes, no, I'm holding on for dear life. It's going to be fine. I can do it. It's fine. But then you get to a point where you can't maintain that anymore. So yeah, this whole month, I just stuck out to me when you said surrender. Surrender is such a counterculture thing to do, but I've seen the most fruit in my life come from surrender.
I think there's so much around us that so many voices that say you've got to work, you've got to hustle, you've got to, somebody can give you a 10-point plan for success in whatever area that you're in. And you're right, it's very countercultural and maybe sometimes even counterintuitive to say, I'm going to give it up, because there's always the chance that if you're giving it up, that he won't return it to you in the same way, that it will look different when you come back on the other side. So as you decided to take that time to pause for the better part of a year, what did you do during that year?
It's a lot of rediscovery. Honestly, it was going back to the basic. It was getting help. It was getting the therapy I needed. It was really repiecing things together and going back to the basics. And I think the biggest lesson that I had to learn was that my value doesn't come from what I do. And my whole belief system, I didn't realize I had built it upon that. It was, if I'm a great artist, if I'm a great songwriter, if I'm a great blah, 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 fill in the blank, whatever it is, then people will think I am worth something, and I will think I'm worth something. So that year was really about rediscovering that identity comes from the love of God and the love of God alone. And that you can't chase it, and putting identity and worth and things that are temporary and fickle will and did leave me so broken and so miserable and so exhausted. I was so tired trying to chase down worth. And so I went back to the nuts and bolts of it all and really had to reprocess and rebuild. And it was about really deciding what pursuing Jesus looked like, not connected to work, not connected to, when your whole career is tied to Jesus. From the age of 14, you associate Jesus with work. I had to reassociate Jesus and re-find him. And it was a beautiful journey. Lots of prayer, lots of really picking up my Bible and diving in and discovering and reading it front to back. And it was a big part of the healing process.
What was most helpful to you in identifying where you had been trying to get your identity from and how to make that switch to finding your identity in Jesus?
Yeah, I think I just hit rock bottom in a lot of ways, where I didn't know what else to do. And I thought that, the only way to get through this season is to heal, is to figure out what matters to me and what I believe and what I want out of this life. And I had such good support. I go back to that all the time. My family was amazing through the whole thing. My friends were incredible, such blessings in my life, and really held me accountable. It was, I think, something that I had to really lean into and notice is, what are the things that trigger me? Whether it's scrolling and seeing somebody on Instagram and immediately feeling like crap about yourself, and then having to go, why do I do that? Why am I so jealous? Why does this make me feel angry? And I think going back to asking the why questions was really helpful in helping show me and navigate what I really needed to work on. I journaled a lot. I journal a lot still. It's an everyday thing, just prayer journaling, writing down what I'm experiencing. And that's been a really healthy way for me to process. And something else I would recommend to people, I feel like we carry these deep, shameful things when it comes to the things we struggle with. Talking about it and just airing it out in a safe place and really just being like, no, yeah, I'm jealous. I'm so jealous, struggling with envy. Yep. And this is what it really helped, because all of a sudden this thing that was boxed up inside of me didn't feel so taboo anymore, you know?
I've heard a lot of people talk about different things in the stories and interviews that we've done. The point of surrender happens so frequently, even though the person's issue might be completely different situation, but surrender is so much a part of it. And then the things that you've mentioned, they just keep coming up. One of them is community. Obviously, you had somebody you could talk to and people around you who were supporting you as you walked through it. Having kingdom community is huge.
Huge.
The word of God and journaling, those things come up over and over and over again. And it's just interesting to hear you say it too. Not that there's ever a formula, but those things, obviously, God's designed us in a way that those things are really helpful. And so it's kind of cool to hear you say that.
Yeah, I think it's self-awareness. I think all of those things lead us to self-awareness. People in my life hold me accountable, you know, and they look at me and they go, now, whoa. Even this past month, you know, again, walking through this really tough month, I've had family and friends who've answered every call and have talked to me and have just been willing to sit in it and talk. And I think that it's both and, right? Like in that list of 3 things, being in the Word of God, journaling, and having community, it's how God designed us. You know, we have our community, we have our people, but we also have to have that time of self-reflection, of sitting in our thoughts long enough to really identify them. And that was another big part too. I think it's just being able to call out thoughts and grow from them rather than, you know, pretend they're not there and force them down and then explode. You know, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that.
Yeah. So as you go through that better part of a year, was there a point where you said, I think I'm going to stick with music, or I think that's what I'm supposed to do? Or how did you come out of that season?
Yeah, so I had a lot of writer's block leading up to taking that big break. I was like, I just couldn't, because nothing felt, I didn't want to write anything. You know, I wanted a number one. I wanted successful music. I didn't want to write good songs. You know, that I realized that I was like, oh, my priorities were skewed. And so I started noticing in that period of time that I wanted to write songs again. I wanted to make music again. I had ideas. I was inspired. I was humming them. And it had been so long since I had felt that creatively free. And so that was, I remember, you know, I told my team, I was like, at the beginning, I said, the goal is I take this break, and at the end of it, I write a really great record. You know, that would be the goal, right? And that would be ideal situation. And I prayed for that, and I prayed over the songs, and I prayed over the new record. And I started getting ideas. I had a really clear vision for the album and for who I wanted to make it with and who I wanted to be in the sessions and all of it. And so as soon as that period of time was over and I had that season of refreshing, we wrote the whole album. I have an album, my most recent one called Church Pew. We wrote the entire record in 6 weeks, which is really fast. My past records have taken me years. You know, you write little by little over the course of years. And this one, all of these ideas came to fruition in a matter of 6 weeks. And it was such confirmation to me that creating from being a healthy creative is more important than being a productive creative. You can replace the word creative with human, and that also works.
So I assume it had to be a really fulfilling experience, because now you're able to write and sing from a place of authenticity. Mm-hmm. It had to be totally different than the rat race kind of thing that you'd been feeling and doing before.
Yeah, you know, so much of it too is because I loved the music and felt so creatively fulfilled by writing the songs, it became less important to me that they were successful, you know, because I loved the music and the music ministered to me, and it came from that place so much that I was like, whatever happens, happens. And I trust that God will get the music and these songs to the people who need to hear these songs. And he's been very faithful in doing that. And it's the stories from the listeners that just keep me going on tough days.
Yeah, I would love to hear about that, because now you're singing and writing and performing from a totally different place.
Yeah, I just feel more like myself. You know, I think, honestly, a big part of it is just growing up and settling in to who I am. And of Of course it'll change. Like 19 to 24 is a massive jump, you know? It's huge. I put out my first song when I was 18, and I'm a different person. I'm a woman now. I'm way more of a real version of me. I've gotten to a place in my life and career, from walking on stage to being off stage, where I feel like the same person all the time. There's a lot of freedom in being like, no, I know who I am. And I'm just going to speak on stage how I'm going to take off the performance hat and speak as myself and hope that connects with people. And it has. The vulnerability is the biggest connective tissue of humanity. It's like being able to share in your weaknesses with each other has a special way of giving strength. Thus, the importance of community. You know, it all goes back to that. You know, you have to find the balance of, because it is a business and you're a brand and, you know, all the jargon and all the stuff, you know, there's that, because that's just part of it. But at the end of the day, it's about being human, especially in Christian music. It's about being human and needing God. That's what it is. It's about the love of Jesus, and it's about trusting that the love of Jesus wants good things for us and doesn't want to harm us, but wants to give us a hope and a future. And it's a game changer.
There are a lot of fun things coming up for Riley Clemmons. Can you imagine anything more dream come true for a Nashville native than singing Christmas music with Michael W. Smith? Riley is joining Michael on a 24-city Christmas tour starting mid-November. She's also got some new Christmas music this year. You can learn more about that and Riley's latest project. It's called Church Pew at RileyClemmons.com. Well, if Riley's story or any episode of The Unfolding has been helpful to you, I'd love to hear about it. Just click the link for the microphone button in the show notes, and you can record your story. Who knows? Maybe it'll be on a future episode of The Unfolding. Well, if you love hearing these powerful God stories and you'd like to make a gift to help them continue, head to wowgod.com and click the donate button. Thanks to the Unfolding team, Lindsay Caparoon, Michael Shermack, our producer and network director, Jason Rackow. The Unfolding is a Wow God production. Discover more at wowgod.com.